Welcome to Azure for the Win, the mostly Azure-focused cloud podcast brought to you by Blue Silver Shift. We like to get together on a Friday, talk about cloud technology, usually have a few drinks, try to have a few laughs, and have some fun. All right, guys, welcome. It's another Azure Friday. It is April the 16th, no, 17th?
17th, yeah.
17th. It's April 17th. All the days are kind of blending into each other because we're about a month and a week into self-imposed quarantine because we decided to start working from home on the 11th. So we're quite a ways into it. So thanks for joining in, guys. Our topic for today, before we get into some of the other formalities, is we're going to be talking about Windows Virtual Desktop. So we're going to be talking about what Windows Virtual Desktop is, and then we're going to be talking about how it's helping companies to resolve the issues that they've been facing relating to setting up and enabling their staff to be operational from home, and why it's both a good solution and why it's working out, and what are some of the different things that you can do with it. So before we jump into that, as per usual, our ritual here, it is Friday afternoon. It's 4 p.m. Pacific time. We're all working from home despite the backgrounds.
But it's 5 o'clock somewhere.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere, exactly. I mean, it's 5 o'clock. I mean, every day. I mean, the hour, time means nothing. It doesn't mean anything anymore. Yeah, so we're gonna have a drink here. I have my PBR. You can't really see it if I go over here because of. And if you're just listening to this and you're not seeing the video, we're using the new Teams functionality to allow us to have artificial backgrounds, and it's pretty good at picking up what is human and what isn't. So you can't see my drink unless I hold it in front of my face. And it's a PBR. So that's me.
I'll go next, I guess. So it's an Irish whiskey. Oh, it's Teeling is the brand. This is a small batch version. I was actually supposed to be in Ireland last week for my stepdaughters. All three of them were going to be in the World Championships for Irish dance. Of course, with COVID-19, travel was not in the cards. So I thought this is pretty fitting. I'll have an Irish whiskey.
So you should have been in Ireland right now?
I was going to be there over Easter weekend. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Weren't you supposed to be in Japan right now, John?
No.
Is that a couple weeks ago?
Third week of March.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I'm having agua. Oh, actually, you can't see it unless I.
John with his typical Starbucks cup. How's it?
And I had to go through a drive-through to get it. That's why I'm not riding my bike, by the way.
I was going to ask how you got that. All right, guys. Cheers.
Cheers. Happy Friday.
All right. So let's jump into it. Windows Virtual Desktop. I think that before we started this, you guys made a comment about what it is and what it isn't in a nutshell, and I felt a little bit validated because I realized that some of my initial thoughts on what Windows Virtual Desktop were somewhat correct, but there's still a lot. There's so much more to learn about it. It's not as simple as it sounds. So why don't we start off with just an overview? What is Windows Virtual Desktop at a high level? What's the main purpose for it? So I'm going to leave it up to you guys. Why don't who would like to take it away?
John. Are you on mute?
Yes. Sorry. Before we answer that, Mark, I want to get into the history of it because I think it helps you to understand better what it is. So most users in a corporation are assigned a desktop. It's a physical when they're in the office, or they're given a laptop that they take home or otherwise. The point is that they're able to use that computer, and that computer brings together three things. It brings together that manifest itself as the end user experience. So it is their location that they log into, and their settings come in, meaning things like their favorites or bookmarks, or how they have their desktop configured, or background pictures or otherwise. It brings in their applications, so the business serves up these applications, and then it brings together the operating system that's used to print or to access files or otherwise. at that location, and that's traditionally how how workers have consumed technology or consumed business applications. And businesses have been trying to figure out ways for years to virtualize that process, give people what are called thin clients, and then be able to put a virtual machine in the cloud or in a centralized data center. And when they're able to do that, you get complete backup of that system because it's not being backed up today or in a legacy system. So that's one aspect of it. Another aspect of it is 20 years ago, terminal services came out, and it's now called RDS, Remote Desktop Services, but it was called terminal services even back in the NT4 days. And what that allows users to do is to actually remote in and get that same graphical experience, get the same applications that are assigned to them, and to actually have their user state. But the problem is that's on a server operating system that is unwieldy towards most applications, and users were fine accessing that. A company called Citrix came around shortly after terminal services came out, or co-developed the RDP protocol with Microsoft, and they created a better management and load balancing style system that would allow you to use your on-premises infrastructure and kind of scale a solution horizontally. Very expensive software, very expensive for what you get. And then fast forward to today, with Azure comes out and Microsoft creates WVD. Now, I could create a terminal services environment or a Citrix environment in Azure, but to do that, I would have to have a lot of experience in RDS or terminal services. I would have to have a lot of experience with Citrix if that's the solution I was going to. And I would have to have a lot of understanding of how that infrastructure works together with domain controllers, DNS, end user settings, applications, etc. With WVD, if I've already got an environment in Azure, meaning I've got an Active Directory domain controller in Azure, I can actually, just through a series of scripts, or through a series of, or through a product like Nerdio, I can actually launch and configure a very large horizontally scaling or very small multi-user Windows 10 Windows Virtual Desktop environment. And that actually allows end users to, administrators to provision remote access to end users. And it does it in an extremely safe way. They've totally modernized how it's done. It's converted away all the underlying server configuration that you have to do. And it's put it all up into scripts that will actually allow you to do the most complex things very easily. And then it ultimately achieves that end goal of bringing together the end user state with the applications with the operating system. So is that a good enough explanation? It's a new cloud VM is the short answer. I don't know if you.
I think a new cloud VM is a good way for the average person to kind of take that all in. I think it's a lot of information. I mean, when I first heard about it, I was trying to understand the difference between RDS and Windows Virtual Desktop, and it was kind of the answer that was kind of eluding me. But
yeah, you can't get Windows 10 multi-user in RDS format, and that is one of the big, most underrated features of WVD. Is that you get the Windows 10 interface and Windows 10 operating system, and you can actually have multi-user. So a traditional, only one person can be on either directly on the console or remotely accessing that computer, and they built that into the core of the operating system. And on terminal services or on server products, you can have 3 people on, 1 on the console and 2 remote concurrently. And on terminal services, you can have as many as your terminal services licenses allows. So that could be 100 people if you bought that many licenses. And on WVD, you can actually have on Windows 10 more than, you break that limit, essentially.
But the key is really RDS and everything before WVD. It was still a server operating system that the users were getting, right? Even if you'd give them the full desktop, it's not going to be the same experience that they have on their PC at work or at home. And so now WVD in Azure gives you that full experience, a native experience that every user is used to. And I think that is huge because
it's totally
change
huge.
management, training, all that essentially goes away.
Well, and little known fact is that people used to struggle to get desktop applications working within that environment, and they don't have to struggle as much anymore because the same deployment methodology or updating methodology used on the previous, you can also use on WVD.
Well, the one struggle I remember from way back when, the very first RDS or terminal servers that were doing at the time, was around profiles. And if a user logs into one host and then the next time through round robin or whatever the load balancing mechanism was, happens to get onto another one, if the roaming data was not configured properly, the user might get a completely different experience, or the data they expected or had updated in their previous session is no longer there. And this is another strength of the cloud offering is with the combination of OneDrive, SharePoint, everything is natively in the cloud. Like, so correct me if I'm wrong, John. I think WVD has its own file system that's associated to the user's profile, essentially, right? So, and that's stored in the cloud. So it doesn't matter if you've got a horizontally scaled WVD environment, like say you've got 1,000 users hitting this, and it doesn't matter what physical or virtual machine is back-ending it, the user's going to get the same data, same information. It's all always going to be the same, consistent.
Yeah, and they did that through a product called FS Logics that they acquired. And that particular product does exactly what you're talking about. And it's a little known fact that everyone knows when you copy files in Windows, any version of Windows, and this happens in Linux too, is the timing is incorrect and they just don't get the file copying timing right. We've all seen memes with that. The same thing goes with profiles, as you just explained, Craig. Profiles are their own beast, and they were inconsistent at best in how you managed it. Even if you did lock down and you managed that only select directories came and went with it. And with FS Logics, you get to create an Azure file share in Azure, so there's no server, it's serverless, and you point to that UNC path, and when your users log in, they collect their profile from there, and it maintains that end user state with applications with operating system consistency across the board. But here's a tip, use the fast disk on Azure files. It may seem cheaper to go with a slower disk on the storage account that you're going to use for it, because you need to actually, it needs to be fairly robust.
So premium storage.
Because what you'll do is create a system, and it will limit, like when everyone's logging in at once, it actually throttles the disk. But what's cool about that, when we discovered that, was we discovered that Azure, through the logging. So remember back when I was talking about the on-premises desktop or the terminal server, you didn't have great monitoring systems for those, or they were really siloed. Now, because it's in Azure, you get the entire platform will be monitored. So you'll be able to monitor the ingress traffic straight through to the end. And we were actually able to see slow performance and determine that Microsoft was throttling the disk because of its size. Mm-hmm. It was being throttled by that. So all that was a quick change the disk, and it was done.
Awesome.
Cool. Yeah. So what do you think to what extent are people deploying this tool now compared to its capability? Because people are rushing to get things set up, right? And everybody wants as quick of a fix to a problem that, in hindsight should have been solved, 2 years ago for however long. And now that we're all under this crunch, well, we're not, because this is the nature of our business. But now that a lot of companies are under this crunch, they're rushing to solve this problem. They're utilizing Windows Virtual Desktop. I know that we have one of our clients is a very major retail company in Canada, very well known, and they're solving these issues very quickly. We're helping them do that. But how does this initial deployment compare to the capabilities of the system longer term?
Well, I can probably chime in here. I think WVD is still relatively immature because it only came general availability end of last year. And although they've been working on the technology for a long time, I think it has legs to go way further than where it is today. It still has some catching up to do where, Citrix and whatever other, on-prem technologies existed for providing similar solutions. But I think it's even hard to probably fathom what the future state could be for WVD. I just think it's going to grow, and it's going to add many more features. I think around my opinion anyway is around they're going to add features around the management of it. Like, how do you scale the environment? How do you, manage the images? How do you manage, the application publishing? All those sort of things make it easier on the IT administrators who are spinning these up. But you're right, Mark, that companies jumped into this very quickly to solve what was viewed as a short-term problem. Now we're, over a month into social isolation here in North America anyway. Europe is a month or so ahead of us. So companies there were doing this a couple months ago. And companies that already had terminal services or Citrix or otherwise set up were able to just add more licenses and maybe more virtual servers to handle the extra load, but they would be okay. Where this now comes in is we're kind of over that point where companies that thought they could just ride this out and manage without needing to set up any virtualized desktop, people will be working from home and just maybe in a reduced capacity, or just kind of try to email files around or whatever, or VPN into a machine that's at their desk and remote desktop, just their own machine. There was workarounds, but those are not going to work for 3, 4, 5, 6 months. Like, who knows how long this is going to go on for, and if we're going to have a second wave too. We might go back to normal living and then have to do another isolation. Like, it's still all up in the air. So I think companies that haven't invested in any virtual desktop solution, whatever the technology is, whether it's WVD or third party or otherwise, are going to have to make that commitment to provide something. And then fast forward a couple of years when we're well through all of this. I hope I'm right on that.
Me too.
But then people get used to this new way of doing things, and this virtual WVD enables you to get the full Windows desktop experience on pretty much any device, right? So people can now be as productive on a tablet or on their phone, or they're out and about and need to launch their legacy application or whatever. Hey, guess what? You can do it on their phone, even on a smaller screen. You can zoom in, do whatever you need to do, but you have those capabilities, right? So I think it has long legs and a very bright future.
Yeah, I agree with that, Craig. Everything that you said there. I think that a lot of people did race to a remote desktop solution or a remote solution because their business demanded, okay, everyone's working from home, let's get this thing going. What they did was your previous remote access solutions were always gauged on like 1/10 of the organization. Right. So that means they pre-bought capacity on-prem or in Azure or otherwise on that 1/10. Now everyone's running through that space for a VPN or for remote access solution, and they're going to quickly come to the conclusion that it's not enough capacity. And when it's not enough capacity, they're going to have to look at alternatives. And if they've got to actually increment the license counter on something like Citrix or something, or another solution, maybe they've got to beef up their firewalls, whatever it is, all of that is going to cost money, and there's going to be, either that's the cost of doing business in the COVID-19 world, or I'm going to try and do this smarter. And as you alluded to, Craig, there are so many solutions around it, and it creates this bubble on any device. So you can get rid of this requirement to give a person a PC. You can tell them to go buy a PC. And if they're downloading torrents or their computer's totally infected, with MFA in this solution, it's nearly bulletproof on how anyone can actually get into it, because it's something that would have to, if your computer was compromised, it would have to crawl on top of that. And even if it got your password, you would still have the MFA blocking those end users and other types of conditional access policies. So I think that you're right, it is the wave of the future. But something you were saying before the show, Craig, was that companies you can't just hyper focus on the desktop. It's all the outlining periphery infrastructure that has to go as well. Because if you've given me this great solution and it's the best it is, I can scale it with my seasonal business or with my demand. But when those end users access files or an application that is on premises, and it's got to go from the Azure data center back to your on-premises site, that's going to be a bottleneck that people are going to start complaining about. And there's no reason not to make that connection as fast as possible. So if you've deployed WVD, start thinking about getting the rest of your infrastructure up in Azure beside it.
Yep. All layers of the application. Yep.
Yeah.
Back end, front end, everything.
Everything.
And I think that's, we've been talking about that type of mentality, like that type of digital transformation strategy, going all in cloud adoption. Of course, we've been talking about that for a long time. That's what we are encouraging our clients to do. But, a silver lining in this whole situation, and it's hard to really even talk about that because it's also terrible, is that, companies are seeing the light now. There's no more argument. There's no more debate about this, about whether it's a smart decision to put everything up. So, it's going to be interesting to watch, especially when we all get back to somewhat of a sense of normalcy, how, companies are going to be, aggressively looking to prepare for the next whatever, right? You're muted.
Again, there's something to be said about how much more secure this is than an on-premises solution. A lot of people don't know this, but when you publish terminal services, RDP, or Citrix out through a firewall, you're actually opening a port. And that port is probably open to the world, meaning that you don't have conditional access involved or DDoS protection in there because it's very expensive. Nor is your solution traversing a region, meaning it's not highly available. If something happens to your data center, your business isn't running anymore. So what these guys do now with the WVD, what Microsoft does is they've got something called Reverse Connect. I don't know if you guys are aware of this. With it, you don't have to open up any ports. What it does is when you go to connect with the client, it will make the call through HTTPS or 443, and then it will come back and talk to you. It initiates the connection that way. It's reversing the connection. So in other words, if I'm sitting there and I've got an IP scanner and I'm scanning, your stuff doesn't even come up on that radar. I would have to have your credentials and put it in there. The second thing is the tight integration with the conditional access policies, as I've said, from both in AAD and in Office 365. You can get DDoS level protection as well as you can get, we don't allow anyone to connect that's not in a G7 country, or just people inside of North America are the only people that should be connecting in, or inside of Europe, whatever, continent you live on. You can actually get it down to that level of granularity. Of course, it also comes with the MFA, so end users who are active in Office, active in using MFA, that's the #1 defense against phishing attacks. And phishing attacks are going to be the most prevalent form of malware attack, and this stops that. So you got 0-day vulnerabilities are gone. You've got anti-spoofing and anti-phishing gone, and with MFA. So these guys have really thought this thing through and made it as tight as possible. Far more secure than any on-premises Citrix.
Why does MFA counteract phishing? I thought phishing was human-to-human interactions.
It is, yeah. So I could give you my password, Mark, and you wouldn't be able to get into my email or anything because you have to have MFA. It's something you know and something you have.
Right. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I'm always thinking of phishing scams. I'm thinking of,
right.
Hey, hey, this is your boss here. Can you please buy, $5,000 worth of Google Play cards and send them, send me the code or whatever.
Yeah. Well,
that's more social engineering.
Yeah, I'm talking about access into the information, not money theft. Good point. Good clarity there.
Well, I think, probably the information to the more sophisticated scammer is more valuable than, whatever the available balance is of a person's bank account. But yeah, interesting stuff.
Yeah, it is.
So, Craig, what are some other items that maybe we haven't touched on with regards to maybe
Well,
WVD or perhaps even just parallel systems or competing products? What else could we kind of touch on from this
it's funny
topic?
that you say parallel systems that are competing, because parallels is
Parallel.
actually yeah, I don't know if we need to touch on competing systems. I don't think that WVD is going to replace, even Citrix or other. There's different benefits and reasons to use any different vendor, any solution. I mean, like John said, Citrix is essentially, it's built on top of RDS. So you can't have one without the other, but you pay extra for Citrix, right? It's basically baked
Yeah.
in with the
For the
RDS. So
management.
yeah, you're buying the management layer. So yeah,
And
I don't,
Citrix has plateaued as well, Craig, I think. I mean, it's fair to say that,
Hmm.
right?
and I think their stock price, although it went up because of COVID-19, would
Right.
have reflected that. It's gone up significantly, actually. That they are kind of entering into, or were, and entering into a phase where they needed to either reinvent themselves or do something different. So yeah, I think they're going to survive for a while, but just like
Yeah,
VMware is going to have to reinvent themselves or they're going to die as well, right?
agreed, agreed. And just to drive a couple of points home here, Craig, on the management side of things, there's this DevOps movement that's infrastructure as code movement from going from nothing to actually having a solution, build it up so that you can destroy it,
Hmm.
or fully automate a pipeline so that everything's in there and there's no manual intervention from nothing to actually dumping it out into production. And if you can believe this, and it's a bold statement I'm about to make, I guarantee you that someone has automated a Citrix build out or an RDS or an RDP, RDS RDP build out. I guarantee that. But it is kludgy and prone to many, many errors because there's not this universal backplane in Azure or through PowerShell or through Terraform or otherwise in Azure that is going to allow that. So right now, I know for a fact that you can actually get WVD running in about an hour.
Hmm.
So
Wow.
that is unheard of through scripts. So starting from a script and going all the way through, and then boom, there's your environment. Then you can start installing your apps, or you can even automate the installation of your applications and your OneDrive and your FS Logics so that end users are just boop, logging in. And what that actually means is that you can get to what's called blue-green deployments. And that means that that virtual machine, as again, one piece of the puzzle, you've got the system state, the user state, sorry, the applications and the operating system coming together. You can actually throw away the operating system. And this is key to upgrading because these systems are continually upgraded through patching. There's something called Microsoft Patch Tuesday. It happens once a month. And that patching has to happen. What you got to do is validate your applications against the patching because the patching plugs holes that the applications may be exploiting. So your ERP or CRM app might not run. So with this methodology, you're actually able to do blue-green deployments, add in new terminal servers, create a pool specifically for that, add 2 production users who are unaware of what's happening, and get a test. Oh, as soon as I see 10 people on there with no calls, then I can start to what's called drain stop out the existing users off the existing machines and script build the new hosts inside of that pool and just start shifting users over to it. It's the ultimate in DevOps, infrastructure DevOps.
Hmm. Yeah, well, the whole automation side of it is key, and I think that's another strength that the Azure offering brings, right?
Yeah, the automation and also the monitoring. They bring large scale monitoring. So
Mhm.
you get Citrix probably has some form of a monitoring console, but it's very limited in what it can grab,
Mhm.
meaning it's gonna show some information to you, But you can't go in and say, okay, when this particular metric hits a certain point, I want to actually trigger an alarm and then start an automation runbook. You probably can, but you're limited onto what's available in the Windows performance counters. Well, in the Azure environments, because the monitoring traverses everything within the environment, you can join two diverse systems together that may actually be served up to the end user correctly or aligned, and say that when this system stops and something happens on my terminal services, create an alert to an Azure action group, and I'll get it, and I'll be able to action it, or start a runbook to terminate that service and restart it. So there's a load of things like that that you can do. And instead of it being inside of a single siloed person on premises and being inside of a single siloed computer system on premises that is going to be protected until the day that computer system dies, it can be in a pipeline that when you deploy, these particular types of monitoring solutions come in automatically. Like it's actually an incredible system.
One thing we haven't touched on, John, maybe you can answer, is around the integration with Active Directory. So companies obviously have a big investment on-prem Active Directory. How does this work with that or Azure Active Directory and MFA and so on? How does it all play together?
Yeah, so today, take WVD out of it entirely. If you've got a on-premises Active Directory and your end users have been authenticating with that, and you are an Office 365 customer, there's a default process where you would have actually extended your directory out to Office 365. When you create your Azure subscription, it will inherit that and create it as what's called an Azure Active Directory. And end users companies who have been in business for 20 years or more have this that are Microsoft centric, meaning that's their main authentication and DNS solution. On the other side of it, you actually can send out, you can do. You need to actually have an Active Directory. So if you don't have one, you got to get one. If you don't have one in Azure in IaaS format, you need to actually create that for this solution, because you want to have all those systems running together as closely as possible, meaning that they're all inside of the same VNet, inside of the same data center in the same region in Azure. That way they'll have fast logons and fast experiences overall. I believe WVD will actually start to use AAD within inside of 6 months. And you won't have that requirement anymore, so you won't have to pay the extra cost to running a VM. But that extra cost is actually just because of, it's what is it, $200 to run a domain controller in Azure. If you think about creating a domain controller in IaaS in Azure, that also means that you need to actually have a VPN, a site-to-site VPN, also in place, because that's how directories will talk to each other. The AAD domain controllers on premises will talk to the domain controllers in IaaS in Azure. And that integration will have to be around. And that is the core requirement. So it's a site-to-site VPN between a VNet in Azure to your on-premises, and you have to have something capable of doing that at the firewall on your on-premises side, as well as having a domain controller in Azure. And then all the subnets and everything else have to be defined inside of Active Directory.
Cool.
So I think one of the things that that you've really highlighted for me, John, is the level of complexity of this system. It's not a plug and play. I mean, you mentioned earlier you can be up and running in an hour with some scripts as a caveat, but you're not going to be able to take your junior IT staff and say, hey, set everybody up on WVD, make sure everything is secure and working properly.
Yes and no. There's something called the gateway and a broker and load balancing that you used to have to manually configure, and you had to have a very good understanding of both the RDS or the Citrix platform as well as your networking complexity underneath it. And then you would route those over to a pool of servers that your users would actually log into, and you can call this front end like a management system. That entire concept and that entire, so if you think about it, to do an RDS or Citrix solution, I need 5 servers to be created in the front that no one's ever going to log into but administrators. Instead with this, it's all converted to PaaS. So it's not an IaaS. You don't have to back it up. You don't have to patch it. It's all handled for you, and you can traverse regions within it. So you could have a desktop pool in one region and a desktop pool in another region, and users would be able to connect into those independently. And again, a high availability solution that traverses geographies in the old world, very complex. So,
but I think Mark's point is correct, though, that you can't. We live and breathe this every day, so it's simple, quote unquote, simple for us, because we've done it. We for us to spin it up in an hour, no, hands down, no problem. If a CIO watches this podcast and goes to their senior person and say, okay, I want you to build this environment in an hour, there's going to be steps that are missed or things that they may not think about or not know about. So we don't want to set the expectation for our listeners that anybody can set it up in an hour. We have the experience, so we can obviously do it. And we've been brought in to customers that have already tried it on their own and hit a wall. They hit, whether it's a performance issue or some other challenge, and they just don't know enough about what WVD is about to be able to overcome those hurdles. So that's where we get brought in. So it's not a bad thing to have to ask for help, because it is still new technology. It's still in its infancy. There's not a lot of documentation out there, although there is, great documentation, but not enough, not like you would see with a mature solution. So, so I think that's the point you were trying to make, Mark, right? But John's point is that it gives you all these other things that in a traditional on-prem sense would have been very complex, very costly to implement and architect and so on, whereas in the cloud, it's not.
It can be done. Yeah, cool. All right, guys. Well, I think that we've covered a lot here. I look at the time like, wow, it's 4:30. That's crazy. I mean, I think I would have thought we were only 10 minutes into it, but I'm going to transition into the bonus. And I mean, I was thinking bonus question, but anything else you think that we should make sure that we cover here?
Not for me.
Not that I can think of.
Okay.
I'm curious what your bonus question is. You always keep us on our toes.
Yeah, it's this one is going to be it's a bonus challenge actually, but yeah. So I mean, great job explaining the WVD, guys. It's I mean I need to really look through those decks and watch some of those videos in more detail, because there's a lot to learn there.
Well, what are you doing this weekend? You got lots of time on your hands, right?
I have nothing else going on. I have my cooking show that I do for my Instagram followers. I think my last video had like 24 views. So
right.
Yeah, it's big time. I'm pretty much ready to go pro. But all right, so this is going to be the bonus question / challenge / wager. Today, there was a news conference that talked about when we can expect some easing of the restrictions that are happening around COVID-19 and what those restrictions look like. There's actually some really interesting stats about it. We'll talk about that in just we can banter about that in a minute. But the question is going to be, so I think one of the main benchmarks that people are going to look at, the average person is going to look at is saying, okay, we're over this now. Whether we get hit again later on, which we probably will, is another question. But one of the major benchmarks people are going to look at is, can you go meet up with your friend at a pub or a restaurant or something and have a beer? So my question to you is, I want you to say, and don't blurt it out. I want you to state the specific date that you think will be the first day that restaurants will allow to have people in it. Now, I'm not saying open to full capacity. I'm saying maybe, it's going to be, probably a 50-person max when they're first allowed to do it. So I want you to type the exact date into the chat. Don't hit enter, just type it in. Okay. Now, when you put it in there, I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, go, and we're all going to hit enter.
Do we have to put the year?
Good question. I just put the year just in case. So whoever gets it closest, whoever is the furthest off so when that date hits, I'm not saying on that date, but soon after, we're going to meet up for a beer somewhere, and the person who's the furthest off has to buy the beers,
Okay.
drinks, or whatever it is that
Are we
have.
doing Price is Right rules? So if you go over,
Good question. No, no Price is Right rules. Just closest to the date. I don't know. Gets the bragging rights, and the furthest from the date has to buy the rounds.
all right.
Okay.
So this is for when they're going to allow people to go to restaurants, even in limited capacity.
Even in a limited capacity, so you're allowed to go in. You can line up or whatever, because there's going to be lineups because people are craving it. But you can go in, you can sit down with your friends, and you can have a beer or whatever. So
All right.
the first date that's allowed.
Hit enter. You guys ready?
Okay. 3, 2, 1.
Oh, I'm
Wow.
right in the middle of both of you guys. That's
I'm
odd.
the most pessimistic here. I thought.
Okay, read it out for the listeners.
Okay. So John said May 16th, which is the May 2/4 weekend. And
Okay, so did you see the Shark Jaws movie where they said you got to open up these beaches by that date?
I did. Yeah, that's a good point.
It's too good of an economic time.
Weekend, yeah.
I'm gonna lose this, aren't I? I'm gonna lose this. I can't believe it. And then so John said May 16th, Greg said June 1st, and I said June 15th. Now I've been saying June 1st as the first round of restrictions, and everybody I've talked to has been telling me that I've been crazy, and it's going to be months and months and months. But now, especially with the recent news, it sounds like they're going to start to ease it. But I don't know if restaurants are going to be in the first round of easing.
Yeah,
We'll see. So.
Nobody
But
knows.
we're all very optimistic. This is good. I'm liking this. I thought one of you for sure was going to say like September 1 or something.
Yeah, I don't know anymore. I mean, every night I talk to my neighbors about it. We're out at 7 o'clock. Last night we were out for 2 hours, and this is probably 50% of the conversation, right? So
Yeah.
it changes every day, but I don't know. Well, I hope we're all right. Let's put it that way. And that it isn't September.
I think I'm going to lose this. I think that I'm going to be the one buying those drinks. Oh well. All right, guys. Well, I guess we'll kill that recording here.
Oh, you gotta sign off.
I don't even know if you can do that. You can do that.
Yeah, don't worry. You don't have to stop the recording, but you got to sign off. You got to do our sign off.
What? Oh my God! It's been so long. What's our sign off again? I don't really
just say cheers. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, true.
I'm gonna take over as moderator, Mark.
I guess I'm losing my edge here, guys. I'm losing my edge. To Craig's point. Thanks everybody for listening. We hit a milestone. We had 1,500 downloads on the podcast.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Over 1,500 now, yeah.
Over 1,500, which is pretty good for just a couple guys, hanging out, drinking scotch and beers and chatting about technology. So, congratulations, guys, on that.
Cheers.
And I think that I was talking to a company that we're exploring a strategic partnership with. I'm not going to mention who they are, but you guys know them. And they were bragging about their podcast. I don't know how many views or downloads they have, but they were bragging about their artwork and their music and the whole the production quality of their podcast. So
did you ask if they'd listen to ours?
I told them to listen to ours. They said they were going to send me theirs. Although I don't think they ever sent me the link, but I told them to listen to ours, and they said that they would. So, but I think that theirs is a bit more like kind of formulaic, a little bit less personality, I want to say. But who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. I actually haven't listened to theirs yet, so I'll be doing that soon. But so thanks everybody. Enjoy your weekends. It's this is stressful for everybody, so try to relax, maybe get out, stay safe, get out in the sun if you can this weekend. Social distance, but get out there and get out of that house or apartment or wherever it is that you dwell. And cheers.
Right. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you.